Hello and welcome to another MeG Podcast. I have, as ever, Richard Jeffrey Cook and Matt Hayward with me. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
The topic for this podcast, some of you may have already noticed from things posted on Facebook or in the MeG WhatsApp group, is the Arab Conquest period. The period covered by the two Arab conquest lists in the Arabia PDF. So that's the early Arab conquest and Arab conquest, covering 629 CE to 685 CE. So quite a pivotal moment in history, really. Very definite, world-defining, really. You can definitely say it changed the world. As ever, Richard is going to cover the history for us to give the background information, and I'm hoping, as ever, will provide us with a few things we didn't know. He always manages to, even in things I've read. So I expect to be surprised as ever. And then after that, we've each got two army lists this time from the period, Arabs and their enemies. We will be covering the big ones. We definitely have Byzantine and Sassanid in there. It covers the period, so it's quite a bit to get through. Hopefully, it won't mean a terribly long, an overly long podcast. So we will try and manage the time as best we can. And on top of that, again, people might have noticed, I asked if anybody had any questions on this period, and we have indeed had a few questions thrown at us. So hopefully we'll be able to answer those. Some may be answered in the course of descriptions of the army lists, but we'll try and cover them all, time allowing. So because it's potentially a bit of a packed show this time, I think probably best if I just hand over to Richard to tell us about the early Arab conquests. Richard.
Thank you, Nick. So the background to the Arab conquest is really the Romano-Persian War of 602 to 628, which was triggered by Khusro II after the murder of his Roman imperial benefactor. He was actually sort of placed on the throne with the assistance of the Byzantines. So in this quarter century of conflict, the Persians actually conquered Roman Mesopotamia, Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. And it was really only a counter invasion by Heraclius into the Persian heartlands that really wrestled a victory from the jaws of defeat. How far both sides were exhausted by this conflict is difficult to judge. In the same period, the Byzantines had actually lost their last foothold in Spain. That was in 621. And in 626, the Avars actually laid siege, admittedly unsuccessfully, to Constantinople. Meanwhile, ancient Arabia was a mix of polytheistic, Jewish and Christian tribes. The focus of the revolution was a merchant who was finding life hard with the constant disruption of warfare. In compiling his teachings on how man's entry into heaven could only be achieved through regular prayer, benevolence, restraint, and submission to the will of Allah, and putting those into the Quran, that Muhammad became the prophet of Islam. By 622, Muhammad had actually been forced to leave Mecca for Medina. And in 623, a Muslim-led Medina was in conflict with Mecca. Battles at Badr, B-A-D-R, however you're supposed to pronounce that, in 624, and Mount Uhud, U-H-U-D, in 625, followed by the successful resistance to the siege of Mecca in 627, really shattered the opposition to Islam. And by 630, Mecca had accepted Muhammad as its leader. A series of strikes in 632 and 633 across the Arabian Peninsula The Ridda Wars, or Wars of Apostasy, confirmed the military strength of the new Muslim state. The next targets were the war-weary states of Rome and Persia. In 634, victories at Dathin and Anyadain established an Arab presence in Palestine before the decisive defeat of the main Roman army at Yarmouk in 636 unlocked all the Levant to Arab conquest. Damascus, Jerusalem, and Antioch had all fallen before the end of 637. Really, only the Armenian and Taurus mountains stopped the Arabs sweeping up towards Constantinople. In 639, Arab forces drove into Egypt, with victories at Heliopolis and Babylon breaking, that can't be Babylon, that's got to be wrong, breaking Roman resistance. I think I meant to say Alexandria there. Within 2 years, the Byzantine Empire had lost its most valuable province forever, and Cyrenaica, a bit of North African coastline just beyond Egypt, was conquered by 643. If the Byzantine Empire suffered, at least it survived. Yes, Yadzigard III, why do they have to make these names so difficult? Was to be the last Sassanid king of kings. Victories at Qadisiyah in 636, at Jalula in 637, and Nahavand in 642 shattered the Sassanid Empire. And when he died in 651, the Sassanid kingdom was gone. So the very nature of Islam as a revealed religion had caused problems regarding the succession to the Prophet Muhammad. A conclave of leading Muslims chose Abu Bakr to lead the caliphate, but this was not universally accepted. Some felt his cousin and son-in-law Ali should have been chosen. This power struggle between those who felt the caliph should be chosen and those who believed it should be Ali and his descendants would actually develop into a religious schism, rendering Islam into Sunni, Shia, and Kharijite denominations. The second succession was particularly divisive. Abu Bakr appointed Umar as his successor. However, Umar oversaw major thrusts into Rome and Persia, and despite various opposition, he was actually a successful leader. But in 644, he was stabbed, and on his deathbed, he appointed a council of 6 to choose a caliph from amongst their number. But he specified a timescale of 3 days. Only 5 of the appointed 6 could actually meet within the timescale, and by a 3-2 vote, Uthman was appointed ahead of Ali as the new caliph. So under Uthman, the territorial acquisitions of the Arabs continued, and the administrative and infrastructure successes of his predecessor were actually built upon. Uthman delegated authority to the governors, the Arab Empire becoming so big at this point that it was becoming impossible to rule from a central location. But his choices for all the governors were all members of his Umayyad clan. The Banu Umayyah were originally an Arab tribe who had initially opposed the Muslim-led armies of Mecca, but had embraced Islam in 629. By using taxes gained to enrich his fellow Umayyads, Uthman became increasingly unpopular. Uthman's assassination and the appointment of Ali as the next caliph would have been an opportunity to see unification Instead, Ali took a very different approach, looking to remove all the Umayyad governors, except one. The exception was Muawiyah, who was the governor of Syria and Mesopotamia. His tenure, which had been since 639, had allowed him to create a powerful Syrian army that was actually loyal to the governor rather than to the caliph. A rebellion by Zubayr, Talha, and Abu Bakr's daughter Aisha was defeated by Ali at the Battle of the Camel. But it was the first time Muslims had actually fought one another and ignited a civil war, the first fitna, which took place between 656 and 661. In 657, the armies of the Caliph and the Syrian governor met in a 3-day battle at Siffin. The mutual surrender led to both sides agreeing a ceasefire and arbitration as to who should be the next caliph. The arbiter actually suggested that Ali should step aside and a new election should be held. Despite saying he would accept the arbiter's decision, Ali actually rejected it, although this probably in the long term was a mistake because it undermined his position and credibility. The decision focused actually on a group who became known as the Kharijites, who felt that all parties at Siffin except themselves had deviated from Islam. And although Ali defeated them at Naharawan in 659, this proved to be a Pyrrhic victory as it allowed Muawiyah to expand his territories. In 661, Ali would be assassinated, and it was Muawiyah who would succeed him. His death nearly 2 decades later would spark a much longer second fitna, which would take place from 680 to 692. So that, in summary, is the history of the Arab conquests.
Thank you, Richard. I was going to, one thing, you when you mentioned the invasion of Egypt and Babylon, it's actually correct. Babylon is correct. There was a
is it?
There was a sorry. It's one thing I do happen to know. Is that there's a fortress roundabout where Cairo, well, within what is now Cairo, that was known as Babylon. So I that stuck in my mind from the first time I ever came across it and thought, eh?
Yeah.
How have we jumped to Iraq?
I should have thought that through more carefully.
No, it's okay, because I think the invasion went down to there, and then it did go back up to
did indeed come back up to Alexandria.
Yeah, just following different branches,
which the Byzantines actually recaptured for a brief while, but it fell again. The whole Byzantine performance in Egypt was pretty pathetic, actually. Given how valuable the province potentially was, their efforts to hold on to it were fairly half-hearted, although it has to be pointed out that Egypt had been under Persian rule just a few years before it was taken by the Arabs. So that might explain part of the poor Byzantine performance.
Yeah, I think it all sort of fits into the sort of picture of exhaustion of the Byzantine Empire. I think, because after the long war with Persia, which was 25 years, of continuous warfare, and I think when Heraclius usurped, he went via Egypt, so might have picked up some troops, and no doubt when the Persians went in, whatever troops were there were either ran away or dispersed. So, I think by the time you get to the 630s, the Roman Empire doesn't actually have that many soldiers left. It can't
In-
afford them.
Indeed, it's most of the Balkans have been overrun by Slavs and other tribes, and the empire was struggling even in provinces like Africa.
Yeah, I mean, Heraclius had to do a big devaluation of the currency. He took it massively loaned from the church. I think melted down enormous amounts of plate for him to, and I think, if I remember rightly, the army basically agreed to a 50% pay cut.
Yeah,
Which
it was.
I mean, it was an
pretty dire
existential.
times.
Yeah. So I was, you said about the exhaustion. I think I personally sort of sign up to the idea that both the Romans and the Persians were pretty knackered. And the Persians had a succession crisis as well.
Yeah, indeed.
So neither were in good shape. So sort of, there is this argument that things fell well for the new Islamic State.
Being in the right place at the right time.
Yes. Yeah, I think I've certainly seen some speculation, for instance, that the first, if you like invasions of Roman territory and Persian territory were actually more aimed at converting the Arab tribes in the area, and then sort of just moved on because they could.
It seems to have been definitely the starting point for the invasions of both empires. Yes, both Palestine and the conquest of the Lakhmid and Ghassanid kingdoms.
Yeah, Matt, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on the history before we move on.
It's really not an area that I know much about, so I've just been putting my size 12s into it. So,
well, we shall move on to army lists then. So again, thank you very much, Richard. Personally, I find it a fascinating period of history, and I think there's lots you can read about it because it's such an important piece of time in history for the world. Anyway, moving on to army lists, we will bring Mr. Matthew Hayward in at this point because, as ever, we'll give Richard a bit of a rest before we call on him again, and because Richard will be doing an early Arab conquest list for us, but we're going to give him a rest. We're going to start with a Byzantine from the Syrian Byzantine list. So essentially the army based around the army that fought at the initial Arab invasions of Roman territory. Matt's going to do that. So I'll shut up. It's over to you, Matt.
thank you very much. Right. Yes, as Nick said, it's Syrian Byzantine, which is 3314 in the, surprisingly, the Byzantium PDF. You'd have thought.
Shocker.
Yes. It's a list I've played around with quite a lot. Roger Whittam uses it to some success. Deviates slightly from his choices, but don't I always with most people's choices? Anyway, right. What have we got? Its terrain types are standard and coastal, which I am assuming is slightly different from your standard. Yes, it's a standard. Most other Byzantines also have mountains in their lists. So reduced terrain type if that's your bag. It's interesting if you want to go down that route. It also allows 2 professional internal generals, 3 normal sub-generals, and the army commander. So the list I've gone with doesn't touch on the allied generals because even I'm not that crazy. So anyway, sorry. So standard and coastal is your terrain. I went with a talented professional army commander, 2 competent professional sub-generals, and a mediocre professional sub-general for a grand total of 12 cards. The PBS actually comes out at a 9 and the scouting at 5. It has a break of 6, which is mighty unusual for me. So onto the list. You have the option.
What have you done wrong?
Yes, I know exactly. I must have got the points up somewhere or had a moment, but it has the option for a fortified camp. I went unfortified simply because, as the list will unfold, it's quite big. So I'm hoping that the camp is not. Well, actually, if you get to my camp, I've probably done something horribly wrong anyway, so it matters not. Right, so you have compulsories of line cavalry. You have to take 8 of those. Not being a fan of average cavalry in 4s, I've taken 2 blocks of 6. So they're line cavalry, which are cavalry formed loose, average, protected, charge only bow, charging lancer. 2 of those. Then we get on to the foot. Now, this list is interesting in that you can actually take the foot as either formed, close, average, protected, experienced dart, short spear, optional shield wall, and shield cover, or you can regrade them to long spear, shield cover, and integral shooters. Now, I've gone with the regrade option simply because I want a nice solid front for my cavalry to operate around or behind or whatever. So there are 3 blocks of 8 of those. So yeah, infantry form close, average protected, long spear, shield cover, and integral shooters. Nice big sturdy block to hold whatever part of the terrain I want to not be sat in. So that takes you to 5 on your tug count already. We've then got the interesting part for me of the Syrian Byzantines is they have a lot of basically Arabic cavalry, the Christian sides that are presumably deciding they don't really want to join Islam at this point. So you have 12 compulsory cavalry formed flex, average unprotected long spear, option to be combat shy. So I've taken 2 tugs of 6 of those. I haven't taken the combat shy option, so they're formed flex, average unprotected long spear. I have taken a single tug of 4, which I've downgraded to poor and the combat shy. So, absolute rubbish. Couldn't get them any worse if I tried. They will sit at the back and do nothing, quite frankly, but that gives me an extra tug. We then get onto the harder Arabic cavalry, the Ghaznid armored cavalry, and they are formed loose, superior, protected long spear. I'm a great fan of this as a troop type. Absolutely superb. They'll stand in front of most things forever, or die like a dog in an instant, depending on how your dice are feeling. But on the whole, excellent troop type.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. And then there's some detached. Now this is where I'm going to fall over my own words. Corsores. Anybody?
Absolutely, we can go with that.
All right. Okay. Cavalry, drilled, flexible, average, protected, experienced bow, African. Now it's an option you rarely see. Basically because it's mostly limited to the Byzantine lists, I think.
Wholly limited, I think.
Yeah, possibly. It's the only one I've seen it. Yeah, so there's 4 of those because I believe you are limited to 1 per 2 line cavalry. So I could have had 6 technically, but they are quite expensive. So I went with 4. They are drilled flexible, as I said, so you can muck about with them quite nicely. So that takes you to 10 tugs. The 11th tug is Arab infantry, which are infantry, tribal loose, average, protected, unskilled javelin, short spear, shoot and charge. 8 of those. And to round us out to a nice 12 for deployment, there are some skirmishing javelinmen, which are infantry skirmishers, average, unprotected, unskilled javelin, combat shy. I downgraded them to unskilled, obviously. 6 of those. I've left them at average so they don't get immediately annihilated by anybody that shoots at them. And they are just purely there, probably to hang around with the cavalry and just act as a screen. I'm not intending to shoot with them. That's it. There you go. 12. Do your worst, or point out where I've made a horrible mistake in my list.
Badoom-tish. Yeah. I've played against this. I'm not against Roger, but against Ian Crosby, who used it at Beachhead earlier this year, and he had 4 lots of the Scootar toy, but otherwise had some obvious similarities with yours. I think I just drew against it. It was quite hard to break down. Those scutatoi are pretty tough. I have to say, I'm personally a bit unconvinced about the long spear option there. I think that might be a shade generous, but it seems popular, and what the heck, you know, it's one of those cool things. Maybe I just want to be mean to them. I don't know. I don't see the long spear coming in until a bit later, but it's hard to call. Yeah, the Arab cavalry, we love them. I think I'm with you. On those detached cursories, which I've used recently in a later thematic Byzantine, or the later thematic equivalent of them, yeah, they're really nice. But, you know, they do 145 points of base is a bit expensive. But even then, you know, I'd have been tempted to try and get the full 6 you can have with the 2-line cavalry. That's another 290 points, isn't it? I'm not sure where I'd get the points from. Might have to lose a tug.
You could possibly try and run it with 11 command cards, drop down to a mediocre, or even go with a competent army commander, because 9's quite generous on the PBS.
Yes, I think that's possibly where I'd look to get some, and then just see how to play around with it. But I did find that, you know, because African is basically Cantabrian for non-skirmish cavalry. It gives the color upgrade on the shooting dice, and also has some interesting. You don't have to skirmish or run away if you're charged. You can choose to stand, which is an interesting option. You can't charge if you're in African, but you don't have to run away. So that makes them really quite interesting, which is also why I'm thinking, 4 could be nice. Sorry, 6 could be nice rather than 4. So, you know, otherwise, it's the one thing I found out when I played against it was, although it's quite solid with all those scutatoi and the Arab cavalry are nice, it just seemed to lack a little bit of an edge to me. I mean, you've got to be a bit careful with the line cavalry because they're just average and can't have melee expert. I believe in the list you could have 1 unit with melee expert, can't you? The Federati, but you've got an 8 minimum on the line cavalry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
I
I
was
was trying
nasty,
to,
wasn't it?
yeah, trying to avoid using that. I mean, I'm less worried about the lack of melee expert on the charging lancers because they can operate with the cavalry that has the African. It makes them a little less of a target for people if there's 2 or 3 green dice sat next to them. So yeah,
so certainly
it's a stodge army. I think it's oddly for Byzantine, it's a stodge army. There's a lot to kill, and it's quite hard to kill. It doesn't break through quickly, but
because actually at Beachhead I played another army that had Byzantine scutatoi in it. That wasn't a Byzantine army, and they just hold a big chunk of space. You know, long spear, shield cover. You know, in some ways I think the integral shooter is a bit overkill for them, but it's compulsory.
Yeah, to be honest, if I had the option to remove it, I probably would, particularly for the Syrians, because I think that's a marginal cost benefit.
Yeah,
for their use.
Yeah, because if long spear is good enough in defence, it'll blunt any charging cavalry, and the shield cover means it takes forever to shoot them down if you're trying to take them out that way. Yeah, it's a solid army, and then you've got to unleash the line cavalry at the right point, haven't you? But when we talk about things you could change, I don't think I'd lose any cards on that. I think 12 is your minimum for this.
Yeah, that was my feeling. So
yeah. Anyway, Richard, thoughts?
I'm not sure I've got anything to add to those thoughts. I must admit, I played Ian's army at Beachhead. I was using good enough cavalry that they went through the line cavalry.
Yeah.
And I just avoided the nasty scutatoi. which I had no intention of charging with my cavalry. So
yeah, I mean, I wasn't trying to charge them. I had
Yeah.
a Seljuk army, which although if I remember rightly, Ian had a lot of his cavalry in fours. My or some of them in fours. My shooting just refused to shoot them down, even when he had small vulnerable units. One of those games. Yeah, I think it's not sure it's my sort of army, but
yeah, I'm not sure it's mine, I must admit.
Yeah. Yeah. Although after using an all-mounted later thematic in the Kent competition a few weeks ago, I would my more sensible version of that does add some Scutatoi to all the cavalry, just because they just provide some stiffness to the army, something you can work around, and I think the three here is good. So yeah, I also get the vibe we think that's a good competent army, Matt, but it's definitely not your normal thing.
It falls into the realm of it'll look pretty when painted.
Oh,
because the combination of Byzantine and Arabic, I think, would be a good contrast.
Yes. So yeah, no, it was a good army to choose, because obviously that would be one half of the fight at Yarmouk, fighting the early Arab conquest. Or is it the middle? Or is it the Arab conquest at that date? So, just one last thought on the Ghassanids. You said, yeah, they were basically they were pretty much had been an integral part of the defense on the eastern borders since at least Justinian's time. So, and after the end of the Persian War, they sort of reconstituted. And I think you're right. Ghassanids fought on both sides at Yarmouk. So, yeah, because the Arab tribes could be distributed over quite an area, So there we are. Anyway, talking of the early Arab conquest, I think it's time for Richard to come back in.
Okay, so early Arab conquest 3101 in the Arabia list. Surprise, surprise. So standard and desert are the terrain types. So I've gone for a competent professional army commander with a talented, a competent, and a mediocre instinctive subgenerals. Because from mine army is 634, and from 634 you can have any combination of generals. So the professionals army commander boosts the PBS, and it just sort of fell out that way. For me, I went for you have to have a mobile camp, so I went for a poor mobile camp, and then I went for 7 tugs of warriors, tribal close, superior protected, shield wall, melee expert, and 2 of them I gave integral shooters, and these are 6s. We'll perhaps come on to why the unit size is.
There is a question about that, as you know.
Yeah. Then, so there's 7 tugs of those. A tug of cavalry, who are form loose, average protected, long spear. A tug of city cavalry, who are form loose, superior protected, long spear. 2 tugs of 4 Bedouin cavalry, form flexible, average unprotected, long spear, and I made them combat shy. So the Bedouin cavalry provide an option for flank marching or for getting round and charging flanks, but they're not really designed to hang around in front of the main fighting line. I think they would have a short life if they tried to do that. Along with that, I've gone for 3 units of skirmishers, a unit of skirmishing archers, who are average unprotected, experienced bow combat shy, a unit of javelin men, who are poor unprotected, experienced javelins and combat shy, and a unit of 6 camel mounted scouts, camelry, skirmisher, average, unprotected, experienced bow. Who I'd probably try and stick through some brush, to be honest, because all camels treat brush as good going, but why not? One thing to note is that the army has to invade unless it faces another army that also has to invade, in which case you have a roll off as per normal. There you go, guys. 9,986 points. Brakes on 6 tugs, PBS of 7 and a scouting of 4. So quite respectable.
Cheers. Matt, I'll let you comment first.
Having just looked up the data of Yarmouk, which is 636, it would be the historical enemy for the Syrian Byzantine list. So in that context,
the early Arabs go from 629 to 637.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In that context, it'll make for an interesting fight, I would think. I'd be trying to overwhelm your cavalry before your infantry overwhelmed my infantry. Being that you outnumber me about 24 to 2. So yeah, the list has rather limited options on what you can do with it, short of mounting everything on camels, which has a certain perverse charm to me, I have to admit. But
the superior protected shield wall mel expert troop type is quite an interesting one, because it's, once you survive the impact, you're probably doing pretty well against most things. So you just hope your opponent doesn't get lucky at the impact.
Or you have bad dice throws and all your casualties fall on the same 6, which tends to be
and being superior and shield wall, they're pretty resilient. For instance, if Matt threw his line cavalry into them from his list, okay, there'll be 1 up charging lancer against superior, or evens against those 2 units you got integral shooters. Those charging lancer can get shatters. The shield wall negates that, and then the Arabs are 2 up in the ongoing fight, in the melee phase. Even that, the Byzantines can break off, but that 2 up could have damaged them quite a lot. So they are pretty damned resilient, those.
Since it's come up, I think that is actually the reason why we don't allow them in 8s, because we did find the army became too resilient with tugs of 8.
Yeah,
whether that was a good decision or not, a debatable matter. But
the question we were asked on this came from Paul Stavel, who has used this army and the Arab Conquest, the one that follows it, and his question was, why does the early Arab Conquest limit them to 6, but the Arab Conquest actually allows them in 6, 8, or 9s? It wasn't changed in the Arab Conquest list, and they are still superior, and they go up to formed close. So
the Arab Conquest list reflects the more organized Syrian, particularly in Syria, where the Arab infantry were more sort of solid than they were in the earlier period. So that's whether they should be allowed 9s, I think is, that one perhaps is a bit iffy, to be honest. But that was the sort of argument for allowing the 8s in the Arab Conquest list.
I must admit, I remember when you did it, and I must admit, I personally wasn't convinced about restricting the early one, but equally at the time it was quite a popular army. It was a bit of one of the armies in fashion, and everybody took them in 6s anyway. So
by and large, yes.
All it did was reflect what people were doing, and I, I've used it since at Foot Sloggers, and didn't actually particularly feel that having them in 6s as opposed to 8s would have been a disadvantage. Yes. So anyway, there we are for
Well,
Paul.
you,
There's your
you get
explanation.
you get more tugs if they're in 6s, and they're probably resilient enough that you don't need to have them in 8s.
Yes.
So certainly the idea in my list with having the 2 with integral shooter is those 2 probably support the cavalry, whereas the 5 that don't have integral shooters are designed to be more aggressive and go against the foot of your opposing army.
It is, yeah. I've got a couple of questions for you about one is you've got 2 4s of the Bedouin cavalry long spear combat shy. Now I remember, and it might have been the last podcast we did, you said you just didn't like giving those Bedouin combat shy, and now you've got 2 units of them.
Guilty as charged. Well, it was the only way I could get the army up to 11 tugs, and I just couldn't find anything that worked particularly well. And I think if you're going to have the Bedouin cavalry, 2 of the tugs of Bedouin cavalry, which does give you the option to flank march them, then that it was perhaps it was the only way I could sort of manage it without losing something else in the army. So yeah,
if you've got them there as a potential flank march, yeah, that makes sense. Otherwise, I think I might have been tempted to do what Matt did in his list and have one of them as poor combat shy and the other as average not combat shy. Yeah, but if you're actually thinking to use there as a potential flank march, and that is on the cards, it makes more sense to have them like that. They just provide a bit more threat that way. So yeah. The other question I was going to ask was, again, Matt sort of touched on it. The army can mount all its infantry on camels to give them the dismountable characteristic. And if you do that, and I think this might be a bit of a glitch in the rules, that instead of moving as tribal close, they move as formed camelry. So they actually get more maneuverable whilst they're on their camels. Something I possibly think we've not thought about, because we tend to make camels tribal anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't have a huge problem with that, because I think the strength of the Arab conquest army was actually its ability to raid. Very much the Arab conquest approach was to raid quite deep into enemy territory, moving quite quickly on the camels. This is why they actually get stuffed by the mountains, because the Arab camels weren't suitable for going over the mountains. So very much the Arab approach was to raid your own enemy, move quickly, and then follow up with the army later. So it sort of has the right feel to me. I'm not sure I think the dismountable rules are quite right, but that's probably a discussion for another day.
Another day, sometime in the future. Yeah, no. I just wondered if you might consider, giving maybe even just a couple of units dismountable, just to be able to move them. It's a double move with a wheel in the first move sort of approach. Might just be able to get you to jump somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not normally smart enough to do such things like that.
Yeah, but the other side, the only time I've ever tried to do that, it's not worked. So maybe it's a bit too clever. And actually, this will relate. We did have a question that was put on Facebook by Sami Huda. Apologies for no doubt mangling his name. Who I think he'd missed the note in the list that says they can have camels, because he asked about whether they should be able to have, basically he related it back to 6th edition, where they could they could basically make a first move as if on camels, but you didn't have to provide any extra figures or not. So to Sammy, there you are. You can give any or all of the infantry in the early Arab conquest list dismountable as on camels, which would allow you to do that as well.
I think the nuance of his question is also whether whether there was the consideration of allowing that single step move but not paying for camels.
The answer to that is no, but also in terms of there's no requirement for duplicate figures. You could do it with a marker behind each unit of a baggage camel or something, or some men at a base with camel warriors on them to represent it whilst they are mounted.
I do wonder if there's an opportunity in this list to do something crazy, like take a talented sub-general, mount 3 blocks of foot on camels and send them on a flank march.
And look for your double reds.
And look for your double reds. And you can have, yeah.
Yes.
Or even two. I mean, even 2 of the damn things turning up on your flank. All right, it's only 12 bases, but superior.
Yeah, I mean, what's the cost of the dismountable?
5, is it?
5 points base.
It'd be something like that, won't it? So that wouldn't be that might not be a bad idea actually, Matt, because Richard has got the talented in there. He was talking about maybe flank marching with the Bedouin, but in maybe a slightly more extremist circumstance, do it with a couple of the warriors and hope you get a bit lucky.
Or do what you said, drop one of the Bedouin to Poor, take the combat shy for the other, and then send that with the camels on the flank march, because it's 3 units.
Yeah, depends whether you want to sort of have the 2 options or one, really, doesn't it? So I think there's something there. There's something there.
Yeah.
So cool. Right. And any other thoughts on that one? Because I've got one more question on the early Arab conquest list that we got from Tommy Warden. It's going back, asking, where did the fanatics go from the early Arab conquest list? Because there used to be provision, it's a few years back now, before when they were taken out, just a unit of fanatic infantry. So Tommy seems to wants to know, where did they go, and presumably why?
Why they went was because there's actually precious little evidence for fanaticism in this stage of the conquests. If anything, actually, the Arab tribes seem to be remarkably disciplined. So it just felt wrong. Is the simple answer.
And I'd concur with that. I think there's if you read something like the history of Tabari, there's plenty of incidents of individuals seeking martyrdom. Whole units, nope. So I think so there we are, Tommy. It just didn't reflect. It's a bit of it was a bit of a myth. I mean, I remember, again, just back to Sammy's comment on 6th edition. I think back then the whole army could be irregular A fanatics, which this is pure fantasy, really. and actually, I have a horrible feeling, possibly goes back to some books written by John Bagot Glubb in the 1960s, who, should we just politely say he was something of a colonialist military chap whose maybe his views weren't entirely based in history, but proved very popular. So I suspect that was an influence at the time. And of course, to be fair to War Games list writers of the time, access to the Arabic sources, even in translation, would have been incredibly difficult. We're talking back in the 70s.
Yes, we're amazingly lucky these days on what is available.
Yeah, it is, and then, not just the books, but the access to papers and whatever through the internet. It is, so, whilst you can look back at it now and go, why did you think that? Actually, at the time, working with what you got, really. So that. Anyway, let's move on to another army list. And I am going to go with one of mine, And I'm now going to confuse myself. I'm going to just move on to the Arab Conquest one, the following Arab list from the one Richard just described. I've got a list for this. So this one is list 3102 in the Arabia PDF. This follows straight on from the early Arab conquest, and it's really covering the army as the Arab become a bit more professional, a bit more settled, a bit more organized. The conquering Arabs are now being settled in new cities, of which Basra and Kufa in Iraq were the biggest. There was one also in Syria whose name I can't remember, and one in Egypt as well.
Would it be Salamaya in
It
Syria?
could have been, I really can't remember. I'll let people look that up and tell me. Nick, you should have known this. So an important feature of this one compared to the early Arab conquest is there's more variety in troops you can have, and significantly more mounted troops you can have. If the Arabs captured herds of cavalry, they were starting to occupy more productive, fertile areas, arable areas, so they could use more cavalry. But otherwise, yeah, the armies remained more or less the same. So anyway, my list is going to use a number of the new toys they can have. So I have gone for a poor mobile camp. You know, the camps remain basically mobile. Lots of camels and families still following the armies around. Similar to Richard, I've gone for a competent professional army commander, and then instinctive sub-commanders. I've gone for talented and 2 competent to give me 13 cards. The list, all the commanders can be any style, so you can do that mix, and there's no allies allowed. So my army comprises of 2 units each of 6 bases of Jund cavalry. These are formed loose, average protected, long spear. One of them also has dismountable, and they dismount as average protected, short spear, shield wall, formed close. To be honest, the dismountable is there because I had some points left over.
30 points, clearly.
Yay, 30 points. Took the list up to 9992 instead of 9962 points. So, and you never know, it might prove useful very occasionally. A unit of city cavalry. So, yeah, this is continuing a theme. I think all 3 of the first lists have had a unit of cavalry, formed loose, superior, long spear. You know, if you can have it, you've got to have it, really. You can have 8 bases in the list. You'd have to have 2 4s. I've gone for a 6. Bedouin cavalry, I've only got 6 of these. Form flexible, average, unprotected, long spear. Yeah, it really is a don't leave home without it. Next unit is one of the new toys, Asawira. These are actually Sassanid Persians. There were a whole bunch of Sassanid cavalry, saw the writing on the wall and changed sides, converted to Islam. Because they were so useful, they were then paid at the highest rate in the army. Pay was generally based on how early you converted to Islam, and so these Persians who converted relatively late in the conquest were given the highest pay. They were that useful. They were seen as that valuable. Anyway, their cavalry, formed loose, superior protected, experienced foe, and there's a 6 base unit of those. I've got 4 units of Jund infantry. These are similar to the warriors in Richard's lists. They're all 6 bases. These are now formed close. As I mentioned, they do change. Average protected, shield wall, melee expert, integral shooters. So I've downgraded these from superior to average. That's partly to get me these 4 units, which is also going to take my army to 11 tugs. I've got a unit of Jund archers, infantry, formed loose, average, unprotected, experienced bows, 6 bases, and another new toy, Dale Army infantry. Infantry, drilled flexible, average protected, devastating chargers, melee expert, 6 bases. 2 sugs. 1, the camel mounted scouts, just like Richard had. Camel skirmisher, average unprotected experienced bow, and some skirmishing archers who are infantry skirmishers, poor unprotected experienced bow, combat shy, 6 bases of. This gets me a PBS of 7 and a scouting of 4. So it's definitely not as solid as Richard's in the infantry, but it's got, I think, got more options in the cavalry. Just one quick thing on those 4 units of Jund infantry, because I've got them in 6s. If you didn't actually want, if you're happy, say, with 10 tugs instead of 11, you could have 3 8s, and that would be exactly the same. Or I think for round about the same overall points, you could have 3 units that were back up to superior. So I think there are some choices there. I've gone with this one to get the 11 tugs. Just I think a bit of extra resilience in terms of army break. Hopefully, you know, the extra, that having breaking on 6 instead of 5 will just keep the army in the game long enough to win. And it's also a reason why all of them have integral shooters, because they've been downgraded to average. So if they are charged, they're about the same, but they're not as good in the ongoing melee. But so you could play around with those infantry and either have 3 8s or 3 6s of superior, because the minimum for the infantry in this list is 16. So you'll meet that. So there we go. That's that. I can sort of see Richard looking a bit unconvinced already.
No, I was just confusing myself with looking at other things. No, I mean it's a variation. I think I prefer the early Arab, to be honest.
I think I do on balance, actually. I think it's just more focused.
Yeah, I mean it would be a close contest, I'm sure. But I think the extra infantry just gives the early Arab conquest a bit of an edge.
Yeah. Matt?
I tend to agree. Yeah, the early one's definitely where I'd head. I mean, I don't dislike that one at all. I'm inclined to go with 10 tugs and take 2 8s of average and a block of 6 superior, just to give the Dale army a bit of support with the 6 superior if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And use the 2 8s as a blocking unit, 2 blocking units wherever you needed them. No, it's perfectly solid, but as I say, I'd be inclined with the early. I formed close is an expensive addition, basically, for something that you're probably not going to be wanting to do much maneuvering with other than going straight ahead, frankly, or just standing there. So
yeah. I think it's a fair comment. It is, you know, it's I think when I first started with MeG, I'd have instinctively gone for the formed because they're more maneuverable, and then as play more, you understand that actually it might not necessarily be a problem if you're tribal. If you just have to work with it, you have to learn how to use them.
Yeah, tribal's fine if you're thinking of going straight ahead. If you want to do something clever, then formed your friend in those situations, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's one of these classic things. You wouldn't mind a couple of units of formed in the early Arab, just to give you a couple of units you could possibly on the end of the line if you just need to do that little wheel to
list writers are evil.
Oh, they're terrible, nasty. I just make one thing that crossed my mind. We both got the camel-mounted scouts in there, and neither of us have made them combat shy. I know I did that deliberately on the ground that they can go and bully another unit of mounted skirmishers, because they are camels, and if you're not combat shy.
I did it because I had the 24 points.
Oh no, I have to say, although if I hadn't had the 24 points, I'd have probably made of combat shy. But I think they have
I'm not convinced they're going to have many opportunities of bully stuff. but
no, but it's all that. It is just 24 points. So it's not too bad. I've got a sort of general question. I think we've just about got time for this one. It's my question is Rich and I have both gone for the competent professional general and 3 instinctive generals, and that sort of approach is becoming fairly widespread on a lot of these sort of armies, because for not a lot of points you get a PBS and scouting advantage. I just wonder if is it a bit of an exploit at the moment? Is it something that, again, obviously nothing to rush into, but should you be saying if you got to have at least 2 professional generals if you have a professional CNC?
You're paying for. I think the points you pay extra for having a professional general isn't disproportionate, because the only real benefit you're getting is the 10 base width range and the increase in PBS and potentially scouting.
And you can command a unit in another command if you really want to.
Yeah, how many times does that actually happen?
I've done it a couple of times where it's just been absolutely necessary.
Fair enough.
It's nowhere near every game. It's more once a year if you use that sort of army most of the year.
It's not something I think's so much of an advantage that I'm going to worry about it.
Yeah, Matt, just quickie on that one for you.
It's a bit gamey, but I tend to agree with Richard. It's if you pays your points and you take your lumps, basically. So it doesn't worry me, but it is a standard. If I have that option in a list, I'm going to take it.
Yeah, I mean, for a talented general, you're paying 200 points more for a professional compared to an instinctive, and for competent it's 150 points more. So that's quite a lot of points for.
It's for me, it's always a comparison between the competent professional and the talented instinctive. You still get better PBS and scouting benefits with the professional than you do with the talented, who's 1 grade higher. I think it's that comparison is the one that feels gamey to me.
That may be that may be where it's an issue.
Yeah.
You're getting the 1 extra card.
You are getting the 1 extra card. It might be a reflection on the, but both Matt and I are thinking that might be the reflection on the sort of armies we use. We get more use out of the PBS and scouting than we do with the extra card.
Yeah, very much so.
It's but I think it is that. Yeah. Okay, I've got one more. Okay, listener question, but again, it came from Facebook, just in relation to the Arab armies, I think, which was from Ludwig Hermann, who if I'm rightly, is from the States. And I think this question was in relation to the Arab armies. Why not some foot with long spear?
Yeah, I mean, first off, to say, according to David Nicol, the Arabs did have some quite long spears. The main reason is that they don't seem to have fought in that particular style. So that's the answer I'm going to give.
That is the answer I would have given Richard. There's certainly, especially in the conquest period that we're looking at, there are quite a lot of spears, but there's an awful lot of fighting done with swords as well. They're not a, if you like, a phalanx type formation of spears. They sort of prod with spears and then get on with sword fighting as well. So it doesn't come across as long spear behavior, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the descriptions I have read seem to imply quite a lot of archers, which is actually reflected in the integral shooter, because again, the archery seems to be more supporting to sort of support the infantry against mounted charges than it does to sort of rain down long range fire. But if there's a criticism of the list, I would have is maybe there should be the option for more archers.
Yes, actually,
I mean, the list can have up to 18, but because they're unprotected experienced bow, you don't tend to take them. Whereas
yeah, I put one unit in that list of mine, but it would be to work with others, and it would need protecting. Perhaps it's another list that just needs a unit allowed to be, a 6-base unit allowed to be protected. I think over the past couple of years, a few have been added into various lists.
Yeah, or maybe even give them spear protection as well.
Yeah,
as be a thought, but anyway, not going to happen for a couple of years.
Oh no, it is, as you know, obviously.
So don't panic, anybody.
Yes, yeah. All these rambling. Should we? Are really our thoughts for discussion. Just give people something to think about. Okay, to keep ticking on then, Richard. To carry on with the Arab theme, but not a Muslim Arab, could we go to you?
You're going to my later pre-Islamic Bedouin, which is Army List 2213. So this is actually in the classical Egypt and Judea. It's got all instinctive generals this time, a talented army commander, talented sub, and 2 combatants. So gone for the 14 cards. A poor mobile camp again. Terrain type, I've gone for the Gassanids. So the only terrain type is plains. And it's a poor mobile camp. I've got a 7 PBS and a 6 scouting. And the reason for 6 scouting will become obvious when I describe the troop types, which are 4 units of 6 armoured cavalry who are form loose superior protected long spear, except I've downgraded 3 of them to average. In fact, that may be what the list requires, I can't remember. Anyway, and beyond that, 4 units of Bedouin cavalry, which are the form flexible average unprotected long spear, also in 6s. A unit of camel riders who are form flexible average unprotected short spear, and 2 units of foot who are form loose average protected unskilled javelin short spear shooting charge. Those are in 8s. Along with those 11 tugs, I've got 2 units of archers, average unprotected experienced bow combat shy, a unit of slingers, average unprotected experienced sling combat shy, and a unit of javelinmen, poor unprotected experienced javelin combat shy, all totting up to 9,988 points. Cool. Deathly silence.
Yeah, no, and yes, you have the average armoured cavalry have indeed been downgraded because the list does allow 0 to 24 armoured cavalry superior, which actually seems incredibly generous. But a command can only include 1 tug.
Yeah, so you've got to have the tugs spread out throughout the army, which reflects the practice of supporting the cavalry with a chunk of steadier cavalry.
Yeah, makes sense. It's I think this could be, and obviously you've gone for lots of cards, which is good.
Yeah, you're probably going to need them.
I
think really against a lot of armies, you could be constantly shifting things around.
You are. In fact, I almost wonder if there's actually an argument you should have a legendary army commander in this and drop something somewhere just to get that 15. The 14 is very good though, because that's one more, at least one more than anything we've seen so far. Yeah, I think this could be great fun to use. But you are likely to keep challenge. I think it could be challenging. You're going to keep moving, and it could drive an opponent completely insane. I presume you'd defend in the plains, given the
You try
choice.
to, certainly.
Yeah.
I was thinking of it as an opponent for the Arab Conquest, so it'd
Yeah,
be
no,
forcing the Arab Conquest
Yeah,
to, because that would be a historical matchup.
it is. Yeah, I'm almost tempted to say, why have you got the foot in there?
Yeah, because I didn't want any more Bedouin cavalry. I thought, yeah, well, bit of rough or something, you might want to hold it.
Yeah, and 2/8 who do have some, albeit limited, shooting and stodge up a piece of rough going against something. Yeah, it's yeah, and I think obviously the sugs there are really useful. I have to say, I cannot believe any camel riders should be flexibles. I have to. How did we let that through? Who let that one in? I think most camels should be tribal. Those camel scouts in the Arab conquest lists are possibly pushing it a bit, to be honest. But full flexible camels. No, it should force you to use more Bedouin cavalry, Richard.
Yeah, I have no comment.
Yeah, but on the fact is that they can't run away though. Well, they could if they have to go to skirmish formation.
Yeah.
They can't skirmish if they're in loose. But yeah, whatever. But you can have quite a lot of them in the list though, can't you?
Now you're asking.
Actually,
Well, Bedouin cavalry,
I've got
32.
Up to 30 bases. Yeah, but just short spear. They're not that great, and they're unprotected. They get gunned down if they go into loose formation. Yeah, no, I think this could be, as I said, I think basically this could be really good fun to use. On the other hand, I'm not sure I'd want to use it for a standard 4-day comp. I think that might just get quite tiring. Just be heavy on, because you would probably be running around so much. I think you'd be mentally exhausted at the end of it. I sometimes get that way with the shooting cavalry armies, and I think this one you probably have to think even more about because you don't have the shooting. Yeah. Anyway, Matt.
There's not much I can add, really. It reminds me of that monstrosity Hunter ran at BritCon, which was essentially the same thing. Masses of long spear cavalry that just it's like
I think he didn't even have that much armored cavalry, did it? It was nearly all just the Bedouins.
it gave my Ottomans a heart attack on Friday night. It's my type of list. I think you're right though. 4 games of it would probably do my head in, quite frankly. But it would. With what the list allows you to take, that's probably the best you're going to get out of it. And I like the foot. I think the foot are an option that just, as you say, don't need any more cavalry.
Yeah, I can see the logic behind it. I just, it's just one of those. Yeah. Take more Bedouins.
I think I'd probably want the legendary commander just because it's one of those lists where you could probably get the legendary commander into it without compromising too much.
Yeah.
Because that would be quite funny.
I think there's 15 cards. It goes, run around, run away. And you've got talented if you want to flank march.
Yeah. I was just thinking that. Put all that flex under a talented general and send him off to have fun.
Well, of course, I can't do that with my list because you've got to have 1 armored cavalry in each command.
Oh, that's true.
So I'd have had to have fewer armored cavalry.
Drop an armoured to a Bedouin. It might give you enough to buy most of the way to
that actually might be a sensible option. But...
Yeah, because I think the flank march could be really. Actually, yes, I hadn't twigged that. I would almost say actually, I think that army needs to have a flank march option.
Yeah. I think you're probably right.
Yeah. So lose one of the average. Drop it down to another Bedouin. Even if you only wanted 4, tough. You're going to have 5, which we're telling you. And get the legendary in.
Yeah, if you just looking at it quickly, if you dropped one of the armored cavalry and placed it with a block of 4 Bedouin, that gives you enough to upgrade one of the other armored cavalry to superior, and that comes in at 9902.
What if you went for the legendary? Do you keep the other one average? Will that squeeze the legendary in, or might you have to like drop some skirmishes or something? Anyway, I think there you are. It's another challenge for our listeners out there. Go and play around with it. See what you can get out of that. So I think there's something there. But yeah, whilst I do like my running around mounted armies, I think that one just could be really quite hard work about doing it really. Okay, I think that wraps up our Arabs finally. 3 Arab armies. We started with a Byzantine. We have another Byzantine to come, but not before I jump in with a late Sassanid Persian, which I think is the overlooked Sassanid Persian list. So anyway, so I've done one for this. So this would be, yeah, as the Sassanids getting well and truly beaten up by the Arabs just before they all fall over and the Sassanid Persian Empire disappears from history. So the late Sassanid list is in the Byzantium list. It's 3314 in that.
I thought it was 3315 actually.
It could be. Have I written the wrong one? Yes, it is. 3314 is the Syrian Byzantine, the one we've already done. Yes. Okay, so I started off well by putting the wrong army number in, but at least it's the right book. It's in the Byzantine book.
Yeah.
So late Sassanid Persian. Let's start with the camp, poor and fortified camp, because I couldn't afford anything better. Persians come with standard plains and mountain terrain. I have continued with the competent professional CNC. And I'm just checking there isn't a note that means I've done something illegal. There isn't. And a mediocre instinctive Persian subgeneral. And I have 2 allied contingents. A Dalamite ally who has a talented instinctive ally general, and an Armenian ally general who is also talented. And yes, Richard, I can see him looking at the army list now. You can take both of these allies together.
Okay. Yeah.
Although I think I had written it out before I double checked when I was drawing this up. So it's got 2 chunky allies. They're both with talented generals because I want them both to play.
Yeah, the only restriction is if you take the ally, you can't take Dalamite infantry from the main list.
Yes.
That's the restriction.
Yes, there is, because the main list can normally have a reasonable chunk of Dalamite infantry, although the ones in the ally are in some ways slightly better because they can have melee expert, and the ones in the main Persian list can't. But if I remember rightly, the ones in the Persian list are formed rather than tribal. So
yeah,
you say, you can play the pays money, and also there's always the risks that come with allies. Although by putting a talented general in, obviously I'm trying to minimize them. Anyway, so I've got the 2 Persian generals who have 5 cards between them. The Persian part of the army isn't very big. I've gone for elephants because you have to, and they are mentioned in the battles against the Arabs, so I felt morally obliged to do them. So there's a 3 base unit of elephants, tribal loose, average protected, shove. There's a compulsory unit of Asfaran. The only 6 bases compulsory. So I've got cavalry formed loose, average protected, experienced bow, short spear, and 6 bases, and a 6 base unit of best Asfaran, who are the same, formed loose, average protected, experienced bow, short spear. Oh, actually, no, both of these are Asfaran. It could be best Asfaran.
You could have done it by downgrading the best Asfaran to average.
So I think at some point I'd obviously done a version that had the superior best Asfaran and then changed my mind. So it's 2 6s of average protected, experienced bow, short spears. But you can call one best, so I have. So those are the only tugs, Persian tugs, and then I've got 3 Persian sugs, horse archers, cavalry skirmishers, average unprotected, experienced bow Cantabrian, 6 bases. 6 bases of infantry archers, skirmishers, average unprotected, experienced bow combat shy, and a 6 base unit of heavily downgraded javelin men, infantry skirmishers, poor unprotected, unskilled javelin combat shy, whose only role in life is to stand in front of the elephants so that the elephants cannot be shot at, should that be needed. So we've got 5 cards for 3 tugs and 3 sugs, but one of the sugs is just almost certainly always going to be being tugged or pushed along by the elephants. So it's a 1 card a unit. The Dalemite ally has a unit of Dalemite Best Warriors, tribal flexible, superior protected, devastating charges, 6 bases, and 2 8-base units of ordinary Dalemite Warriors, tribal flexible, average protected, devastating charge and melee expert. And to round it out, a 6-base unit of Dalemite archers, infantry skirmishers, average unprotected, experienced bow combat shy. The other ally is Armenian, and this is an ally contingent that we have seen before in other lists. 6 base of guard cavalry, formed loose, superior protected, charging lancer. 2 6-base units of Armenian cavalry, formed loose, average protected, charging lancer, melee expert. And the compulsory unit of Armenian horse archers. Again, it's downgraded for points, and also so I can get 6 bases of them, which takes my scouting from 3 to 4. Otherwise, I might have just had 4 bases of these, but they're poor, unprotected, unskilled bow combat shy. They're compulsory. You're probably going to do very little with them. So, as I said, I've really only got 6 bases instead of 4, because it does take the scouting from up to 4. PBS of 8, scouting of 4, 9 tugs, 5 sugs. Only 4 of the sugs are likely to do anything, and one of those is just being driven in front of the elephants. I think maybe the oddity I've taken here is the Dalemite archers. I just fancied another unit of skirmishing shooters in this army, possibly just to shoot down pesky Bedouin type cavalry if they're lurking around. And to be honest, they're likely to be tugged along by the Dalemite infantry as well. I suspect if you dropped those, you could probably upgrade one of the Persian Asfaran to superior, which is possibly why I had my list, as you will see when I put it up, has got a unit that's billed as best Asfaran. So there you are. It's a late Sassanid Persian that is mostly not Sassanid Persian, but I think it's got some fair punch between the Armenians and the elephants in a mounted side. The Dalemites obviously can be quite punchy, and they can certainly operate in terrain. They've got the superior unit in there. Okay, it's a 6 instead of an 8-base unit, but it is superior, so it's more impactful. And you throw the general in with that, hope to get a shatter first up, and that then rolls down the line. It could be quite pokey in the right circumstances. So there we are, chaps.
Nice. I like it.
I was quite pleased with it when I came up with it, actually, I must admit.
I also like it. I don't like the elephants, but I do like it.
Oh, you just have to take the elephants, because there's one of those lovely bits in it might be one of the battle of the bridge where the Arabs actually lost, and one of the reasons they lost is one of their commanders. It's one of those lines: "He was stood on by an elephant," and then the Arabs ran away. You've got to take them if you're fighting Arabs.
I just don't get on with them.
I was about to say the silence alone told me you weren't convinced on that one.
Look, to be fair, I think they add to the list. I just have this incoherence when it comes to elephants. They just don't work for me.
Yeah, to be honest, you if you didn't take the elephants, you wouldn't need the javelin men. You could swap those for another average unit of the Asfaran.
Although you have to say elephants are quite reasonable against the tribal close of the early conquest army.
Not bad against formed as well. Formed is no better. Fawn close.
Indeed, yes, absolutely. Now
Yeah.
think about it, yeah.
Yeah, obviously the shield wall
and-
makes no difference.
Shield wall makes no difference, and the melee expert.
Yeah, it's only 3 base units, so
Yeah,
it's the ultimate glass cannon, really. But yeah, there's one thing about this list with the Aspharan. I did look at whether to take the shower shooting option version, which is
I wondered.
a bit more expensive, and I don't think just 2 units of them would be enough. They'd be too static, and having these able to do the skirmish is actually far more valuable.
Yeah, it might be an option if you've got more cavalry and don't have the allies, but that's a different type of army. The big question is, how many S's should there be in Sassanid?
I insist on spelling it with 1. I know a lot of conventions do, because it's the House of Sassan, which is always spelled Sasan. I don't know where the second S ever creeps into it. And I always say Sassanid, not... Sorry, Matt.
No, I was just going to say, because some people just need more sass.
It's more sibilance. It's more snake-like. It's a... I also say Sassanid, but a lot. There is a lot of, I think most academic publications say Sasanian, but I think it's every other dynasty that controls Persia is an id.
Yes.
You got the Achaemenids, the Arsacids, the Seleucids. then you get Sasanian. Then there's a big gap, and when you next get some Persians, some more Persian race, they're all ids as well. You know, the Samanid. Ghaznavid. So why the Sassanids, Sassanians, with a double S? Anyway, there you are. That's. I'm just trying to rack up nerd points here.
I'm desperately trying not to play they're trying to get in touch with that inner id, but
anyway, back to the army. So is this getting a bit of a thumbs up?
Oh yes, I like it.
Yeah. Now, what worries me about that is we're recording this 2 days before the toil lists have to be in, and this could be used. In fact, I think all the lists we've got tonight could be used at toil. And I looked at this one, I thought, oh, that could be interesting.
But obviously, clearly, you've got a plan of how to fight it should anybody take it.
Well, I'm hoping we won't be publishing it till after the list deadline. So it's sort of the only people who know about it at the moment are the 3 of us.
And I'm not taking part in toil. So.
I'm not either.
So it's just
you're
me.
okay.
No, I thought you were, Matt. Anyway, so there we are. Yeah, I think I'd probably have to paint some elephants up since I sold my original Sassanids, and now, but a week or so, plenty of time. Okay, well, if that sort of got a bit of a thumbs up, but again using the sneaky competent professional in there, we shall move on to the last list. Mr. Hayward.
Right, there we go. Right, I've gone with thematic Byzantine. 688's the date I've chosen for the list. It's in the Byzantine lists. It's 3317. Much more limited in your general choices from the previous Assyrian Byzantine list. You can have only professional generals and no internal allies. So it's 3 subs and the army commander. Terrain is the standard coastal mountains of the Byzantines. Unfortified or fortified camp is your choices. I've gone with the earlier date. 2 reasons. One, because it fitted with the theme of this podcast better, and second, it actually has quite a nice ally, to my opinion. But if you take the later version, which is post 740, you can actually take Tagmata cavalry, which are the superior charging lancer melee expert boys, which are very tasty and very expensive. So leaving that aside for the moment. So I went with unusually for me, I went with a competent professional army commander, 2 competent professional sub-generals, and talented, instinctive, later Moorish allied general. This list has PBS of 8, scouting of 6, tugs to break of 5. It also comes in at exactly 10,000 points, so I'm almost obligated to have to use it at some point. So there you go. Anyway,
It's
unfortunately,
it's always the moral pressure from the army list, isn't it?
absolutely, yeah. I went with the unfortified camp. Same principle as the Syrians. If you've got to the camp, I'm probably not in any condition to fight on anyway. So there you go. The list has first class thematic cavalry compulsories, only 4. So, yeah, but as it happens, I actually went with 4 tugs of 6, which are cavalry formed loose, average protected, charge only bow charging lancers. So a mere 24 of those. 2 tugs of detached corsores, or however I pronounced it last time, because I can't be consistent. Anyway, sorry. When am I ever? Anyway, yeah, so they are cavalry drilled flexible, average protected, experienced bow, 2 tugs of 4. Same principles to the Syrian list. You can take up to 1 per 2 of the first class troops. So theoretically, I could have taken 12, but as discussed earlier, they're damned expensive. We then have
they've got African again, haven't they?
Oh, sorry, yes, they have Africans. Yes, so yeah, protected, experienced bow African. 2 units of the Scutatoi infantry, which are formed close, average protected, long spear, shield cover, integral shooters, 2 blocks of 8. The list only allows you to take 16, so I've taken the maximum.
Oh, right.
So that's 8 tugs. Your 9th tug is the compulsory Moorish cavalry from their list, which are cavalry formed flexible, average, unprotected, experienced javelin, 6 of them. Banging troop types if you don't want to fight anybody. And then the additional bonus to the list, you've then got 3 units of Moorish best light horse skirmishers, cavalry skirmishers, average, unprotected, skilled javelin, 3 of 6s. 2 of them are combat shy, but there were enough points precisely to get me to 10k to have one as not combat shy. That obviously will be the one that will never be anywhere to fight.
But, of course.
Obviously, yeah. But so that's it. 12, a lot of shooters, a couple of good blocks of infantry in my mind that can be used as islands in the storm, so to speak, just to control bits of the table, allow your cavalry to move around, just get in the way, basically. Aim with the list would be delay charging with the cavalry for as long as possible and use the 22 green dice to hurt somebody. Sorry, not the 22 green dice. So the 22 bases of 22 green dice would be lovely. Sorry, 2, 4, 6, 10 green dice.
Wow. Interesting.
I'll say I think I've seen this one before as a list or something similar. Matt and I have been talking about this. I think it's really quite nice.
Yeah, I like the look of it. Lots of nice skirmishing cavalry that can do some damage, and then you're charging in with your first class thematic cavalry with the punch.
Yeah, and as you said, Matt, you got your two islands in the storm.
I think the original list we discussed, I didn't have any of the infantry, and it was just didn't have quite the stability it needed. I think
it could be. It was a while ago, but I know. I as I said, after using my late thematic, this is all cavalry. I think they're putting like 2 units of those Scutatoi in there. It would really make a big difference. So yeah, no, I think it's I think it would require a certain degree of timing, a bit of touch.
Yeah.
Pick your moment, but those three. I'm convinced that the javelin, skirmish, and cavalry can sometimes suffer because of the 2 base width range rather than 3 for bows. But having used 3 Numidians together, I do find sort of 3 is the magic number. Two doesn't work. 3 can shred people.
Yeah. And I think in my mind I almost had the thematics, the first class working with the detached Africans who aren't skirmishing but are as formed, so you've still got the 2 green dice for a 2 wide frontage.
Oh yeah,
but with them best light horse tagged on the end there, so you're pulling a block of 2 and then pulling the light horse with you, because basically the cavalry's there to stop anybody interfering with the skirmishing shooting.
Yeah,
they just countercharge or step forward or whatever, or even stand there and take the lump for being charge only bow and shoot.
Yeah.
Whilst the cavalry whilst the light stuff backs off. But
Yeah.
it's
I have to say,
I like it.
yeah, and with your PBS of 8 and scouting of 6 especially, you've got a fair chance of seeing a good chunk of your opponent first. So you know, against the right opponent, you could max, as you say, all those 10 files of possibly green, at least white S, count as a wound at one end.
And if you really get screwed on the terrain, that Moorish general can actually take all of his troops and flank march.
Indeed, yeah, because he's flexible as well, so they can come on a single red.
Yeah,
I think it's got a lot going for it. It has, but you know, it's definitely, as you say, it's not a, oh, I've got 4 loads of lancers, I'm going to throw those in at the earliest opportunity, because you've got all that shooting and your 2 blocks of Scutatoi to work round. Yeah. I think it's a nice combo.
Yeah, shockingly, it's a Byzantine army that relies on softening its enemy up first and not doing something daft.
It might do something daft at some point.
Oh, well, that's purely general fault, I suspect. But
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's just the way it goes. So that's good. So yeah, that seems to get a bit of a thumbs up. In fact, I got the impression, unscientific, that possibly got more thumbs up than the rest of them. Probably that and Richard's early Arab Conquest, possibly the 2 most popular. Maybe with my late Sassanid.
Oh, I'm keen. Out of all of them so far, I'm keenest on the late Sassanid. That's a good combined army. I think but
you'll have to get rid of the elephants.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
It's the classic idea. Yes, that's my favourite, as long as I can tweak it.
I'd even run that as is. I just know with the elephants, I'd get myself into a world of hurt. That's a purely personal thing. That's not a dislike of the list. It's just me and elephants have issues.
Yeah, so, there's a certain you would expect to lose them. You know, the elephants probably wouldn't survive. But you know, it's one of those, in an ideal world, you might want you'd have the elephants in an 11 tug, except you're going to lose them and think of it as a 9 tug army with some expendables. But yeah, but I do feel that, you know, those 3 topped out, and the Syrian Byzantine, the Arab Conquest, and the late pre-Islamic Bedouin are the second ranks out of this. So we have a couple of player questions still lurking. One is another classification from Graham Wilmot, which is basically asking how the sources led Meg to classify Arab cavalry as long spear, and also asking us to compare and contrast with the sources on a Meg treatment of the Byzantine and Sassanid cavalry. That's quite a harsh question, Mr. Wilmot. We get to sit back and let Richard take this first.
So why are Arab cavalry long spear? Mainly because the charging lance doesn't seem to be quite right for Arab cavalry. It doesn't fit their tactics, as I think we hinted on earlier. Compare and contrast with the sources on the Meg treatment of Byzantine and Sasanian cavalry. Yeah, that probably needs about 2 hours on its own as a topic.
You've got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Tops.
So we're, in terms of the Byzantine cavalry tactics, we're looking at sources like Morris, or Strategicon, is it, for Morris? And in effect, how that's also a useful source for the Sasanian cavalry. So yeah, the Byzantine cavalry is more a shoot and charge, represented by the charge only bow. Sassanid cavalry, the Asvaran, either at various periods you've got the cataphract type cavalry, or you've got the shooty bow type cavalry. So you've definitely got different historical cultures when it comes to cavalry tactics, and possibly adding an extra with the Armenians, who sort of influenced but are influenced by the Byzantines. That's your 2-minute answer.
Yeah, I mean, I've got thinking about this. I think, yeah, broadly. I mean, you'd already previously mentioned about, David Nicole says that the Arabs did use long spears on horseback, actual long, genuinely long, and I did a bit of digging, and one of the names for their long spear was Rumh, RUMH, which I think basically means Roman. So it did similar to the Byzantine spear, and we know the Byzantine Contarian spear was quite long. And yeah, the strategicon, the Byzantine tactic is shot in while charging, with this long spear. So charging lancer gets pretty much the right effect there, for that. Sassanids possibly a little bit more tricky in some ways, in that the strategicon doesn't mention them having spears, but other sources like Procopius mention them using spears in combat. So, and I think again, I suppose partly comes down to because they are bow heavy. You wouldn't give them although the spear could possibly be quite long, you wouldn't give them long spear because that would just make them, long spear experienced bow. Whoa, that'd be a bit of a super troop, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think you have to focus on the tactical approach rather than the weapon itself when it comes to classifying cavalry.
Yeah. Okay, so there you are, Graham. And the last question is also potentially quite a big one, so we're not going to have a massive debate on it. So it's from Paul Stavel again. But he asked, in historical and MeG terms, what gave the Arabs the beating of the Byzantines? I suspect I didn't really comment in historical terms because MeG, especially in competition games, equal points is not history.
Yeah, I think it was lack of troops and lack of money and lack of motivation compared to the Arabs is simply the case. So if you want to go historical, give the Byzantines fewer points and force them to downgrade a lot of their troops. And then you might get the same historical result.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely sort of structurally they were, and similar I think for the Sassanids, isn't it? After 25 years of knocking lumps out of each other with various internal problems, they're just no longer able to. They lost internal cohesion as much as anything.
Well, and initially, I mean, the Sassanids definitely didn't actually see the Arabs as a threat, and the first few armies they sent against them were all very much local forces without much central backup. And by the time they sort of took the Arabs seriously as a threat, it was a bit too late.
Yes. So yeah, so there we go. So there we are, Paul. And as I said, in MeG terms, well, I would hope the games turn out to be, competition style games, equal points and all that would turn out to be fairly even, down to the skill of the player. But there's historical reasons. Okay, we probably need to think about wrapping this up. We've gone through 6 lists, quite a bit of history with some some little rabbit holes from the questions we've had. Which thank you. I think we might repeat that, unless Richard and Matt decide to throttle me for doing it. Richard mainly, because he gets obviously the brunt of it.
No, I think it's a good idea. We'll do it again.
Yeah, yeah. When this episode goes up, I have a fair reading list for people, and a number of books that I think apply to this, and figures for armies for this, but we won't go through them now because we've been running the best part of 2 hours now, and that's probably as much as you ever want on a single podcast. So I just wonder if there is, before we finally wrap up, if we have any other business.
I was going to mention that I have now added history notes enhanced with the lists of battles and campaigns for the early medieval list sets. So,
and how many was that?
An extra 950 battles and conflicts.
I think I said it last time. We worried about Matt's sanity with some of his army lists. I think compared to trawling through to get 950 battles. Are they becoming more easier to identify?
It's
since you've moved on from things like the chariot period.
The one that, I mean, this is daft, but the one that gave me real problems was the Battle of Somme, TSUMB, which was Armenians and very early Georgians defeating a Kurdish Arab army in 997 or something like that. And could I found this reference, but then could I find a source to back it up? It took me ages, but there you go. So yeah, no, sorting out some of the Arab history gets very confusing. Yeah, and some of the East European is equally obscure. So that took quite a lot of work as well. And I was amazed actually how many battles the Anglo-Saxons were involved with. Lots of kingdoms, of course. So and I guess the English history is probably documented in far greater detail than the but yeah, that one did surprise me.
Excellent.
Anyway, do enjoy.
Thank you for that. So that's quite
Eastwards.
I said last time, monumental piece of work, Richard. It's just to go through. I look forward to scouring that. I'm going to go through and see how many battles between the Abbasid Caliphate and the Zanj you've got in there. I'm guessing the answer is not very many, because I don't think many of them have names. It's just another battle in some swampy bit of southern Iraq,
near Basra. Yeah,
near Basra, part 1 to 73.
I think I've listed about 6. But
yeah. Yes, endemic warfare in the swamp for 15 years. Yes. Lovely. Matt, have you got anything that you would like to bring to the attention of the listeners?
No, I've been fairly isolated from all the gossip at the moment and what's going on. So I think there's Toil, which is a week Saturday. Is it the Easter bank holiday?
It's the Easter weekend, and the weekend after is roll call for the 28mm Magna.
7,000 points.
Indeed.
I believe, which lists due in tomorrow. So
as we're recording this, yes, they are. I will be sending out a reminder to those who haven't sent their lists in, which of course is old news by the time anybody listens to this. So it is, but the first one up is Toil in Derby, Boards and Swords Hobbies, one of Will Denham's regular ones. Looking forward to that, although I still haven't decided. Although, yeah, as I said earlier, that Sassanid, since you guys seem to like it, I'll have to think about that. I've got about a day or so to make up my mind. So that should be at 15 armies in that time, shouldn't it?
Well, I can always offer you the dice of the gods for choosing.
It could be it could be the dice of the dogs, couldn't it?
Yes, it could well be. Yes.
It is. Right, to not bore our listeners anymore, so hopefully you have enjoyed that. Really quite a focused one in terms of the armies. They all could have met each other, really. Obviously, again, thank you, Richard, for the history. And yeah, hopefully the questions from the listeners works, and we shall repeat that if people want it to. So at this point, I will wrap up. Once again, thank you to Matt and Richard.
Thank you.
And we
Fun
will
as always.
see you next time.